Right. Okay, we'll start with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Welcome this week to Parsha Toldot. Just interestingly, there is another Parsha that starts off very similarly to this week's Parsha. So this week's Parsha, which if you have the stone Chumash, is on page 31, and it starts out, Eila Toldot, I'm sorry, that's not right. This week's Parsha is Ve'eila Toldot Yitzchak. Hold on one second, I was on the wrong page because we're going to compare it with the other, which I just said. It starts off on page 125. Ve'eila Toldot Yitzchak. And these are the offspring of Isaac ben Avraham, the son of Avraham. And then it says, Avraham holid at Yitzchak. Avraham gave birth to Yitzchak. So two interesting things. One is it starts off as Ve'eila Toldot Yitzchak. There's another Parsha that starts off similarly, which is the Parsha of Noah. Noah starts off Eila Toldot Noah. What's interesting is in that Parsha, the Parsha is not called Toldot, it's called Noah. So it says these are the offspring of Noah. It's not, the Parsha isn't called offspring, it's called Noah. But in this week's Parsha, where it says Eila Toldot Yitzchak, the Parsha is not called Yitzchak, it's called Toldot. So I think there's a hint to us in there. So this comes from a wonderful shir from Rabbi Mordechai Satarsky. It says, Eila Toldot Yitzchak, if it was named Yitzchak, we would think that the Parsha is really just about Yitzchak, but it's not about Yitzchak. It's about Yitzchak and Yaakov and Aesop. And it is about the whole continuity of the generations after Yitzchak, more so than about Yitzchak himself. Whereas Eila Toldot Noah, the Parsha is about Noah. So just an interesting thing that there's Toldot appears in both of them. You would expect one, they would expect it to be parallel. Either the word is Toldot or either the word is the name that follows. Either one should be called Noah and one should be called Yitzchak, or they should both be called Toldot. So for sure we don't have two Parshas that have the same name. So there's a differentiation, but it could have been Noah and it could have been Yitzchak as the name of this Parsha, but it's not, it is called Toldot. Hey, hello, Andy, nice to see you, and Rebecca. Okay, so a few things about this Parsha and where we are in time. So tonight begins Rosh Chodesh Kislev. I love when Rosh Chodesh Kislev comes after being in the month of Cheshvan, which is empty, that we have the month of Kislev, which of course is the month of Hanukkah. Hanukkah, we're already in the mood last week in our synagogue, at least when they did the blessing for the new month. They did part of the blessing to the tune of Ma'ot Tzur. And I happen to be very music responsive. So as soon as I hear that melody, even though it's for the words of the new month should come to us for all good, etc., what comes to my mind is it was already feeling like Hanukkah. And that's not crazy. Even though Hanukkah starts on the 25th of Kislev, 30 days before a holiday starts, we're told that we're already supposed to start focusing on that holiday. And the Parshas that we're going to be reading during the month that precedes Hanukkah, and Hanukkah inclusive, are going to be somehow related to Hanukkah. So what we're going to explore today is what's the connection between the Parsha of Toldot and the holiday of Hanukkah. And we're going to see that we are getting ready to celebrate this holiday of Hanukkah. Okay, another piece of information just to hold in your mind, going back to the Parsha of Noah, not today's date, but the date that was on Tuesday is mentioned in the Torah, which was the 27th of Cheshvan, which seems a little bit random. But keep your string on Toldot here, and we're going to go back to Noah, where I was before, and the end of the flood, of when that happened. On page 39, this is chapter 8, verse 14. Chapter 8, verse 14, Parshas Noah. This is at the end of the flood. And on verse 14, it says, and in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was finally dried. This second month at this point is considered to be the second month from creation, and creation was in Tishrei, and that means that the second month is Cheshvan. So on the 27th of Cheshvan, it says that the waters had all dried and the earth was ready for humanity to start over. So that's what we celebrated this week, was the 27th of Cheshvan, which is start over time. I love all new beginnings, love all new beginnings. And the 27th of Cheshvan is new beginnings after destruction, not just a new beginning like Bereshit from nothing, but new beginnings from a really bad place, of what happens when the earth is then dried and Noah and his family are able to exit the ark and go out and start humanity all over again. It's the day of second chances, but not just second chances after a minor mistake, but second chances after a very major destruction. Andy, did you have a question? I see that
I did. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
When you said did you say 30 days before the holiday we start celebrating?
We start focusing on it.
Focusing. Thank you.
And so, like, for example, 30 days before Pesach, you're supposed to start reviewing the laws of Pesach and kind of start focusing on that. It's as if the kind of like a retail, except they go way more than the 30 days. They've already got the Christmas stuff out there. Okay, like that. It's like we don't have our holidays just when they happen. There is a much more expanded and expansive experience of what that holiday is, the spiritual energy, what our mindset is supposed to be. So even though it really kicks off tonight with Rosh Chodesh Kislev, because Kislev is the month of Hanukkah, it starts 30 days before Hanukkah. Since Hanukkah is on the 25th of Kislev, that really means that the 25th of Cheshvan, we're already in that mode. And since the 25th of Cheshvan is just right before this 27th of Cheshvan, which is the day that commemorates the earth drying and Noah being able to go and leave the Teva, it says the Hanukkah, kind of part of the Hanukkah message is about the redemption and the restarting of things, whether it's on the global level of all of humanity or whether it's for the individual, for the world, ourselves. We are in that mode of hopefulness. Okay, so that's what this is. That's what this is all focused on, and Hanukkah is about that. So the question we're going to ask, so that was a great question. So the question that we're going to kind of dive into is, then the parshas that we are reading also are connected. It's not just like, oh, it happens to be the Parsha of Noah, which happens to be read during the beginning of the month of Kislev, which we're already starting to study because it's already the Parsha for this week, which we're still in Cheshvan. So what's going on with Hanukkah, the Parsha of Noah, and how we're and what kind of focus we should have our attention on before we even get to Hanukkah, which is going to start on the 25th of Kislev. One thing to keep in mind is that we have an understanding from our mystical tradition that each of the 12 months is kind of under the auspices of either Jacob or Esau, that the months are divided. Now, there's more information, there's a lot more information about that I have not reviewed recently, and it has gone out of my head. I can't tell you much more about it, but there are months that are under the kind of like the auspices, the domain, the reign of either Jacob or Esau. The month of Kislev, the month of Tishrei, Cheshvan, and Kislev are under the auspices, under the strength of Jacob. However, the month of Tevet is under the domain of Aesop. Now, the month of Tevet, we're going to observe a fast day, which is connected to the destruction of the temple. It's one of our fast days on the 10th of Tevet. This is very interesting because the holiday of Hanukkah spans both of those months. Bless you, Helene. Bless you. That it starts in Kislev, but we have a Rosh Chodesh, and then we go into the month of Tevet. Hanukkah is the only holiday we have that spans 2 months. All of the other holidays are nestling in whatever month they are in. Pesach is in Nisan, Shavuos is in Sivan, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot are in Tishrei. Everything kind of is in its own thing. Purim is in Adar. The only holiday, and it's not just like, oh, it just happens. The only holiday that spans 2 months is the holiday of Hanukkah. So this is giving us something else to tell us that Hanukkah is about reconnection, is about connecting things that don't seem on the surface like they should go together, like Jacob and Esau, like Kislev and Tevet. And we're going to see that, let's see, oh, okay. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what happened. Okay, so this is what we're going to observe in the month of Kislev, is that we're going to go into also the month of Tevet when we are observing Hanukkah, because we're saying that Kislev is under the auspices of Yaakov and Tevet is under the auspices of Aesop. It makes perfect sense that before we even start Hanukkah, as we're getting ready for the month of Kislev, that we should have the Parsha that brings us to the introduction of Jacob and Esau. It's like, what was that relationship? What is it about them? And who is Aesop? And what are we trying to do when we put together Kislev and Tevet, when we put together Jacob and Esau? So we know from the get-go, Jacob and Esau have a pretty strong connection from the very beginning. How are they connected? Like, they're twins, okay? It didn't have to be that Isaac's sons, who had different approaches, different personalities, and different issues in the world, they didn't have to be twins. And what we learned is something fascinating, is not only were they twins, it says that they were in the same sac in the womb. They were not in separate sacs, they were in the same sac. And it was a full-term pregnancy, meaning they shared 9 months in very close proximity. And that's how they came into this world, except we know from the text that they were already struggling in the womb. And in fact, Rivka goes to seek spiritual guidance about what is happening. So on page 125, verse 22, it says, the children agitated within her, and she said, if so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of Hashem. Now, this wasn't a woman who was just having a difficult pregnancy because she was carrying twins. She doesn't go to her OBGYN. She doesn't go to a midwife. She goes to inquire of Hashem. It's like, there's something going on here that doesn't make sense. So she said that, and we've heard the Midrashim, and said that when she would go past a place of Kedusha, of holiness, where Torah was being learned, there was agitation in that direction. And then near a place of idol worship, there was agitation in that direction. And she's like, what's going on? So she wants a spiritual explanation for her physical experience. And so she goes to inquire, and she's given a spiritual answer. And it says, and Hashem said to her, verse 23, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 regimes from your insides shall be separated. So when it says it's separated, it's referring to the idea that they were in the same sack. It's as close to being one person as possible, and yet 2 people. The might shall pass from one regime to the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. What's interesting in the Hebrew is that if you look on the Hebrew side of the text, you'll see that there's a little notation in the right-hand margin, and it says goyim, and then it has a kuf. That means that the way that we say that word is goyim, meaning shnei goyim, which means 2 nations. But if you look in the Hebrew where the little circle is, it doesn't say goyim. It does not say gimel vav yud mem. The way it's written is gimel yud mem, and it should be pronounced geim. It's like, what's geim? So this word is related to the word to mean illustrious, ge'ah, that ge'ut. We say that about God, ge'ut lavesh, that God wears splendor like greatness. So it's saying it's not just that there's 2 nations. That doesn't necessarily tell you anything about them. It just says that there's going to be differences between them. There's just 2 of them. To say that there are these ge'im who are goyim, that there are these, and now here we're saying goyim, and we don't mean non-Jews, we mean nations, because that's what goy literally means, is nation. Goyim means nations. These two geim means these two great, illustrious nations are inside of you. So that contributes to our understanding that there's something great about Aesop. And there's something, of course, we know that there's great about Yaakov, but it's the greatness of Aesop that puzzles us. It's like what happened to him and what's going to happen to him in the future. And that there is going to be this idea of the might shall pass from one regime to the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. There's also considered to be a hint. The hint to these great peoples that are in Rivka are considered to be an allusion to two great people in our Jewish history, real people. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, Rabbi Judah the Prince, who was the codifier of the Talmud, and Antonius, who was a Roman ruler. And the two of them were very wealthy and very good friends. It says Antonius was a descendant of Aesop, and of course, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is a descendant of Jacob, being Jewish. That the two of them, they ate together, they spoke together, they were very close friends, they were very wealthy, they were very prominent. It says in the future, and it says then there's some understanding that Antonius at some point converted, and he became, but he was under the influence of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And it says that this represents, when it says that there are these two great nations, that we're told that in the future, even though we have this struggle for a long, long time, in the future, there is going to be a friendship, a kinship, and a reunification of the two. And it will happen when, when the older one, Aesop, understands who he is vis-a-vis Yaakov. That when he, and I use the word submit, not in a submissive way, but when I'm going to talk about it like, if you're a disciple of someone, you bring your talents under the auspices, under the tent of who you are a disciple of. You devote yourself to that. You don't lose yourself, you devote yourself. That's two different concepts. So Antonius was a devotee of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. In the future, the descendants of Aesop are meant to be devotees of the descendants of Jacob, meaning that there will be a recognition of God as one, but that they will bring all of their greatness to bear. And in fact, we understand that Aesop was actually greater than Yaakov, and that was one of the reasons why Isaac loved him, is he saw his greatness, but his greatness was trapped in him. It was like he had amazing holy sparks that were trapped in him because he became a servant instead of Hashem. He became a servant of his own base desires. So maybe we've known people who had so much potential. You read about the person in your high school who was like most likely to succeed, or your college most likely to be whatever, and instead their life goes off. And I'm not talking about people who have mental health issues or something. I'm talking about people who made really, really bad decisions and followed their worst judgment and got themselves in a whole lot of trouble and became a big nothing. And you say, oh, they had the potential to be so great. It's like as somebody who's a mastermind criminal, focusing more on the mastermind rather than on the criminal. Criminals have to be smart, unless you're one of the stupid criminals. Sometimes they post like on Facebook, like stupid things, like the bank robber who hands like his card with his name on it to the teller and says, give me money. It's like, okay, now we have your name, address, and email. So that was pretty stupid. But somebody who's like a real mastermind, these people who hack into things, I'm like, I can't even get into my own account. Like, how are people hacking into things that don't belong to them, of other countries and other businesses? How are they doing that? It's like they're smart. Aesop had tremendous potential. And something that has tremendous power and potential is, I won't say it's dangerous. It's risky. It's risky to be that person. It says Aesop was that person. In the future, the Aesops and the descendants of Aesop will understand that their power, their greatness can be still powerful and great, but when it is under a code of morality and ethics. And when they do that, they will become really great. And that will be what we're looking for. Patricia, yes, if you want to unmute.
So are the descendants of Aesop the Christians?
Basically, it's
Okay.
it's the Greeks, the Romans, Greeks. Western civilization is considered, if not in actual physical bodies, because there's been so much mixing of everybody, it is the Western civilization and the Western values, many of which are amazing, amazing values. Look what the Greeks created, amazing things. And yet they were also so cruel beyond belief, it's beyond our comprehension. So it was outside the realm of morality. So yes, go ahead.
So then, do the Muslims come from Ishmael?
Muslims come from Ishmael.
But that's not part of this equation.
It's not part of this equation. It's actually a different equation, because this is talking about within our own. So, and we have evidence. In fact, what's pointed out that's really fascinating. It's not like, oh, this will never happen. It like already has happened. Rabbi Akiva, who is the source of the majority of our Torah, of the oral law, is a child of converts. He comes from descendants of Aesop. So does our translator here, the Onkelos. He was also from converts of descendants of Aesop. I believe the prophet Ovadia, also from the converts. Avtalion and Shmaya, somebody to other people. These are people who are descendants of Aesop. They're descendants of Haman, who were great scholars in the land of Israel. That's Aesop. So it's not like, oh, they're just too far gone and there's never going to be this bringing together. There's never going to be this reconciliation. It's like, yes, there will, because they came from the same place and they are going to return to the same place. There's going to be a hard road from then until that time, but that's what the coming of Mashiach is about. That's what the illumination is about. That's what Hanukkah is about. Because you think about Hanukkah, now I know, and we're totally fine lighting your menorahs inside on your dining room table and doing your whole thing. But the actual halacha is the menorah is lit outside. It's on the street. It's like it's bringing in the street. It's like we're looking for the holy sparks. Where are the sparks of Aesop? We need to illuminate them and bring them into the house. That's why the mitzvah of Hanukkah is on the house. We're trying to bring all of that in. We need to light the way, like to show the way. Here is the way into the illumination of holiness. Bring your strengths, bring who you are, but into the tent of holiness. People who think like, people think it's like, oh, being religious, all this stuff. It's like, you don't even have a good time. You can't have any fun. It's like, you can have plenty of fun. And there's a kosher way to have fun. And the Aesop approach is like, no, it's like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It's like, no, I just want to follow what I want to do. I want to do what I want to do. But that will find its correct place eventually. So we have the menorah is outside. Not only that, yes, Andy.
I'm sorry. Are you saying to bring the sparks of Aesop inside?
They are supposed to be, we are supposed to find them, like we're spark collectors. The Jewish people are spark collectors. We are looking for how to bring humanity, the good part of humanity, to bring it into the tent of holiness, which is what Judaism represents. Not that they have to become Jewish. It is only an acknowledgement of God and not self that is ruler. So yes, that's called bring.
But didn't you say that he didn't have goodness, that he was, why would we want his sparks in our house if?
Only the good sparks. Sparks by definition are good. We're not talking about the bad part. We're talking about separating the chaff from the grain, that we want to bring the good part in. So there's a very there's a very weird sentence that is an allusion to the goodness that is trapped in Aesop. It's like, so we see that there are certain people who have managed to find their way out, like Rabbi Akiva's parents. They found their way out. The Onkelos found their way out. Other people who have converted to the Jewish people. So it's not necessarily, so those examples are people who have converted. but it's not limited to people who have actually converted. But what we're saying is they brought themselves to a place of holiness. You don't have to convert, but you do have to get yourself focused vis-a-vis God, of who runs the world. Is it God, or is it, my whim and what I want to do? Remember that was Adolf Hitler. One of his accusations against the Jewish people is they brought what he called blemishes to the world. And one of them was conscience, morality, which he said is for the weak. Okay, that is Aesop run amok, amok, amok. It's like they sought beauty. They sought beauty and perfection in humanity, but it was through the path of cruelty because it was not subject to God. So when you hold yourself up as God, then the cruelty and the destruction that rules the world is beyond our comprehension. And our world has seen exactly what that was. But their words were like, oh, we want the purity of the Aryan race, the perfection of humanity. Everyone will be beautiful. That is Western idea. That is Greek thought run amok completely. So here's the allusion to the idea that there's something trapped. When Jacob and Esau grow up, on page 127, verse 27 and 28, it says, the lads grew up, and Esau became one who knows hunting, a man of the field, but Jacob was a wholesome man, abiding in tents. So first of all, Esau was the outside man, and Yaakov was the inside person in the tent. And tent is always a place of holiness, of internality, of valuing that which is internal, and the outside person is being deceived by that which is external, how things look, as opposed to what things are. So Aesop he went off in that direction. And just to say, his mission, the mission of Aesop was to be an external person. But what he was supposed to do is to bring the external and bring it into a place of holiness. Jacob was like holding down the fort of holiness in the tent. Okay, so he's like the guard there. Aesop was like the SWAT team. He was supposed to go out into the world, be involved with the physicality, but to bring it into the tent of holiness. He got lost. He got lost and he got sucked into it. Think about this. Someone works for the Drug Enforcement Agency and they end up becoming addicted to drugs because instead of taking the drugs and getting them off the street, they get them off the street and into their bodies. So it's not so crazy to understand that the people who are on the front line of doing the hard work of perfecting the outside external world can actually get trapped by that very external world. You have a nurse who's dispensing narcotics and instead she's taking them. It's like, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be administering them in a healthy way. So those are just like two examples. And here's the line here, verse 28. Isaac loved Esau. It says, for game was in his mouth. Now that is just a weird statement, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Game was in his mouth. You just picture like this prehistoric man, like with like a steak sticking out of his mouth. It's like, what does that even mean? That's terrible. So it says that Kitsayid Bafiv. So the question is, what game was in whose mouth? So one understanding is because that Isaac loved Esau because Esau brought him meat, and so he was like a good provider, and so he loved him. But that doesn't really say so much about Yitzchak. You're telling me that like the great Yitzchak, that the reason he loved his son is because he gave him a good rib? Like that doesn't even make any sense. A deeper understanding is that Yitzchak loved Esau because it says Said Bafiv, and Said means also something that has been trapped, because it used that word before, that he was an Ish Yodea Said. He was a man who knew hunting and trapping. It says that he loved him because something was trapped in his mouth. What does that mean? Is that Yitzchak saw his potential, and he saw the sparks of holiness that were trapped in him. And it's like your special child, the one who has so much potential, but they just need extra attention. And in a way, the word love doesn't mean how you feel about them. It means what you give them. So the word ahava, the root of that is hav, and the word hav means to give. It doesn't mean how you feel. Okay. Love is what you give. So it says that Yitzchak gave more to Esav because he saw his potential. Rivka, who came from a family of swindlers, was like, there may be potential, but he's lost it. And she invested in Yaakov. It's like, he needs to be the one. It sounds good. You know, our patriarchs are they're such idealists. And the matriarchs are like, I'm telling you, dear, that's not what's going on here. They see the world a different way with more clarity. They're both right, but one is like, well, let's talk about where we're at now. So Rivka is the one who sees, like, you know, Jacob is the one, he's gonna somehow have to, and that's what ends up happening, a full different understanding. Jacob is going to have to fulfill both roles. We're going to need to combine man in the tents with person outside. How is that carried out? How is that carried out? In the very, very famous story where Rebecca says, put on Esau's clothes and go in and get the blessing. Was it really about deceiving, like, oh, that Yitzchak's going to think it's this one's like, would you really be confused about your children because one was wearing one outfit versus another and you're blind, you can't see anyway? And I'm sorry, an animal skin does not feel like I've seen men who have very hairy arms, but nobody feels like a goat skin. That is like a whole other category. So like what was going on beneath the surface is that when Yaakov buys the birthright from Esav, what he's really doing is buying his identity. And I don't mean identity theft like how we know. He's buying his mission. He's like, you're getting caught. You are getting caught up. It says that on the day when Esau comes in from the field on verse 29, Jacob simmered a stew and Esau came in from the field, which is where he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the outdoor person and he was exhausted. It says, why was he exhausted? It said because he engaged in the 3 cardinal sins that day: murder, idolatry, and sexual immorality. That's why he was exhausted. And it wasn't like, oh, I was working in the field, I'm so exhausted. He was exhausted from his evil work. And Esau said to Jacob, and look at his language, pour into me now some of that very red stuff, for I'm exhausted. Is that the way you talk at a table? Would you let anybody come to your table and say, just pour that red stuff down me, I'm exhausted? It's like, excuse me, please pass the soup. Like, what are you talking about? The way he was speaking gave evidence about where he was at. Language conveys a lot about where you're holding in your moral development. Some of that very red stuff. He therefore is called his name Edom. It's from the word Adom, which means red. So he's called red stuff, basically, because that was his focus. And he didn't even say, I'm hungry and that smells delicious. He says he was so visually focused, pour some of that red stuff down me. It's just such a vulgar way to speak. And Jacob said, sell as this day your birthright to me. And he says, like, look, I'm going to die. What use is my birthright? You know, he says, like, eat, drink, and be merry. I don't care about a birthright, because a birthright at that point meant that you were the one who served God. It was like you were the priest of the family before the Levites were designated as the ones who are the Kohanim and serve in the Beit HaMikdash and the temple and all that. It was the firstborn. That's why we have the redeeming of the firstborn child, because really it's supposed to be the firstborn child, firstborn son of every family, but instead we have the Levites. So we redeem him and say, you were supposed to be it, but you're not going to be it because God now has the Levites. So, but you still are the firstborn. So we have to do a little something here. There still has to be a redemption. So when Yaakov is asking this of Esav, he says, sell me your birthright, because that's what the birthright is. It is the right to serve God. And Esav's like, you know, what's that to me? So Yaakov sees like he is no way able to fulfill this mission. And then later, when it's time for the blessings, Rebecca, close to the end of Isaac's life, is like, you know, son, you need to be both. You need to be both Jacob and Esau. And we see this is going to carry out, it's going to play out. Jacob ends up with 2 wives. He ends up with the wife that was to have been the wife of Esau, which is Leah, and Rachel. He ends up with both of them because now he has a dual mission. He is both Jacob and Esau. The twin is put back together again in the form of Jacob. And yet that creates hostility on the part of Esau. It's like, you took my birthright. It's like, I didn't take it, you sold it. You didn't want it. Well, we know how those things go. Even when somebody relinquishes something wholeheartedly, they have second thoughts. So the fact that he had second thoughts is actually to Esau's credit. This sounds weird, but the fact that he wanted to kill Jacob in revenge is actually to his credit, because it means he cared. Instead of like, what's it to me? I'm having a great time. I don't need any birthright. I don't need this spiritual blessing. But he did want it, which means that there's a part of him. It's like, okay, his conscience did prick him a little bit. There is something redeemable about Esau, even in that horrific kind of encounter. Esau will be redeemed. It's just that he wasn't able to manifest it in his whole life. So here comes another Hanukkah piece. The other thing that birthright entitled the holder to was burial in the cave of Machpelah. Burial in the cave of Machpelah is like, I don't need that. I'll be buried. I'll probably die in the field. I'll probably die in a hunting accident. Like, I don't need the cave of Machpelah. So he gives it away. So look at this. We're going to see a hint to Hanukkah here. So when Jacob says to sell it to me, on page 129, verse 33, and he says, Jacob said, swear to me as this day. He swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. What does as this day mean? Swear to me as this day. What does that mean? So some say, swear to me on this day as clear as day at it, as clear as the day is. Make this sale completely clear. There should be no question whatsoever. I'm not twisting your arm. There's no trickery. This is a clear as day, just like we say. It was as clear as day. We use that term in the vernacular when we say something was totally clear as day. But our sages look at this and see something also hinted to here, which is in the Hebrew. The word is kayom, which means, so this is a grammatical thing that I learned in my ulpan, which is really interesting. If you wanted to say like the day, like as clear as day, all you need to say is kayom. Kayom, which means like day. If you say kayom, that's really a contraction of two letters. Kaf, which is the like, and hey, which is the. So when you say kayom, you're really saying kahayom, kahayom, as the day. And it says, like, what's the day? It says the day is a hint to the kaf hey. What's kaf hey? Kaf hey in gematria is, kaf is 20, hey is 5, as the 25th. What's the 25th? The 25th is the 25th of Kislev. The 25th of Kislev, and like, what does that have to do with anything? It says on the 25th of Kislev is going to be the day that Jacob and Esau are both going to be buried. So there's a tradition that says that they were buried on Hanukkah. Their burial was a little bit traumatic. And if you look, fascinating midrash that says that Yaakov died actually during Sukkot. But if you remember, Yaakov, many, many years later, dies in Egypt. And they have a whole ceremony over him, and he is actually embalmed because it's going to be a delay until he is buried. He's buried 70 days later because they had a 70-day mourning period for him. And then Jacob's sons transport him to the cave of Machpelah to bury him. And who shows up on that day? Esau, saying, you can't bury him there. I'm going to be buried there. It's like, no, you sold that. But Jacob's not alive anymore. It says that in the wait that they go back to Egypt to get the bill of sale of the firstborn right. And in the meantime, it says that one of Jacob's sons or grandsons kills Esau out of the disrespect that he's showing his father or grandfather. The Midrash says that it was Hush, the son of Dan, who was the grandson of Jacob, was deaf, and he couldn't hear this whole conversation, and he just thought it was such a disgrace to his grandfather Jacob being buried that Esau was protesting. They said he took a sword and cut off his head, and that Aesop was actually died on that day, and that this is kind of gross, like little boys like this kind of thing. His head rolled into the cave of Machpelah. Says the only part of Aesop that deserved to be buried in the cave of Machpelah was his head. Now you could say that's so gory, but if you think about it, it says that's where the sparks were. That in his mind, he knew Torah, he knew what was right. It was just there was a big disconnect between his head and the rest of his body. So his hands stole, his body committed atrocities, but his head actually knew. And so in the precise, I don't know what you call judgment of that, it says, so his head deserves in the cave of Machpelah. So they are both buried on the same day. Jacob had died earlier, but they were both buried on the same day. Rebecca actually hints that they are going to die on the same day. And isn't that fitting? It's like a Shakespearean tragedy, right? You have these twins who shared a sack in life. They go their separate ways. They live their lives in such completely different ways. And in the end, they are buried on the same day and they return to the same place. It's kind of weird. Now, Rivka somehow knew that she was going to lose them, if you will, on the same day. Rivka's long gone because her sons are now quite old. But if from the last week's Parsha, when, hold on a second. No, I'm sorry, not last week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha, when Aesop is upset and just irate about what Jacob did as far as getting the blessings, Rivka sends Jacob away, sends him to go to her brother Laban to give Esau a time to cool off, except we know he doesn't really ever totally cool off. But on page 141, verse 44, Rivka says, I'm sorry, let's go back to verse 43. So now, my son, Jacob, heed my voice and arise, flee to my brother Laban to Haran, and remain with him a short while until your brother's wrath subsides, until your brother's anger against you subsides and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send and bring you from there. Why should I be bereaved of both of you on the same day? Says that this was considered like Ruach HaKodesh, that she knew that somehow she was losing them on the same day. They were buried on the same day and they were buried on Hanukkah. It says on Hanukkah, so on one hand, it is the loss of Jacob and Esau, but in a very weird way, it's a reunification. It is reunification of Esau's head with Jacob's whole body. It says, and that is what Hanukkah is. It's where now we're not going around decapitating people, but what we are is that Hanukkah is really a battle of the spirit and of the mind. Purim was the holiday when they were going to kill us. Hanukkah wasn't, they weren't going to kill us. The Greeks wanted us to just become Greek. Like, why do you have to be so Jewish? Just join us, which is what the Jewish people did. All sorts of stories. They put a gymnasium next to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple. The gymnasiums was where you extolled the virtue of the beauty of the human body and you did things naked. And the Jewish men who got caught up in that tried to reverse their circumcisions because the Greeks felt that that was an atrocity. I can't quite picture that, but what I understand is that's not really possible. But they tried because they wanted to be part of the Greek way of life, which was this super focus on externality and on wisdom, but wisdom devoid of holiness. It's like they believed in being smart. They believed in intellectualizing, but they did not believe in holiness. So that was and this has been a big attraction. Jewish people, Jewish assimilation has basically been that. It has been a worship of the intellect, a worship of accomplishment, achievement, etc., but not in the context or framework of holiness. So it's totally appropriate that Aesop's head gets to be in the Menorah Machpelah, and that it would be on Hanukkah, and that the Hanukkah holiday would be the holiday that spans the 2 months, the month that is under the auspices of Jacob, which is Kislev, and the month that is considered under the auspices of Aesop, which is the month of Tevet. And it's meant to be bridged and illuminated. And it's so beautiful. Hanukkah always has a Rosh Chodesh in it. There is always, and this year, which is always very exciting, we have Hanukkah, there'll be 3 Torahs in the synagogue. So we have Hanukkah, Rosh Chodesh, and Shabbos are all coinciding on Saturday, December 4th. So all the shuls that only have 1 Torah or 2 Torahs, everyone's scrambling to find a 3rd Torah because there's 3 Torahs. It's so magnificent. And here we have this nexus point. We bring together, it's like, what did the Greeks want to outlaw? Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, Brit Milah, and the study of Torah. It's like, well, guess what our holidays will be all about? Rosh Chodesh, the study of Torah, and Shabbos. And it's an 8-day holiday, which is always an echo of Brit Milah, of the 8th day circumcision. It says, we're bringing the light to the street. And we're going to bring the menorah. It's going to be lit outside. We're looking for you. It's almost like a search party. It's a search party for the greatness that the Western world has to contribute. The Western world is amazing. In fact, there's discussion says the Torah can be written only in one other language other than Hebrew, and it's Greek. You can write a Torah scroll in Greek. Who knew? Nobody's doing it, but you can. Because Greek is about, they're the descendants of Noah from his son Japhet. The son Japhet is it means from the word Yafeh, which means beauty. But it says that Japhet will dwell in the tent of Shem, the Semites, the Jews. It needs to be in a structure and a context of holiness and morality and ethics. Otherwise, it goes and only creates destruction, cruelty, and everything that we have seen in our recent past of humanity, of what that turns into. You have a place that gets rid of people who, have any kind of physical deformity or defect. You get rid of people who are mentally not whatever. You get rid of this, you get rid of that, you get rid of Jews, you get rid of people with dark hair, you get rid of people who have certain noses, you get rid of people. The Germans literally, as part of their twisted mind, literally measured faces and took measurements of people before they killed them. And if they met like the certain Aryan whatever, they would let them live. And if they didn't, they had it set up so that there was a shooting right behind them. They would be measured, whatever, and then shot right there. It's like, it's so disgusting. But in their minds, they were seeking the perfection of humanity. And it wasn't just one person. This was a society that bought into this. So we think, oh, what's the big deal? Not everybody has to be holy, religious, whatever. It's like, oh, yes, you do. In the end, yes, you do. Because the danger of the opposite is just beyond comprehension. And we've seen it. But in the end, all of that will be brought together. So in addition to the menorah being lit outside, it is also lit on the left side of the doorway. Now, this should kind of get our attention. For anybody who's studying any kind of Kabbalah, what's our preferred site? And I'm saying this as a side, as a left-handed person. The preferred side is the right. That's where the mezuzah is. The mezuzah goes on the right. When you put your shoes on in the morning, you put your right shoe on first. Preferably when you're getting dressed, you should put your right sleeve on first. When you're washing your hands for Netilat Yadayim, right hand first. Everything is about, or you pick up the cup with the right hand, fill it, and then etc. If you're left-handed, so there are some halachas, and I have to buy the book because there's a book out that's like halachas for left-handed people, where your left hand becomes your right. But right is the side of, it's like the good side, the yamin. And how do you say, yes, Patricia?
Sorry, is it the left side look when you're standing inside the door or outside the door?
Beautiful, great question. When you are standing outside, it's the left on the left side. So the mezuzah would be on the right and the menorah would be on the left. Now the word for left is small in Hebrew. That's how you say small is left. That is also related to, it's like, in most languages, the word for left has some negative connotation, right? In French, it's gauche, okay, rive gauche. It's to be like not so good. It's considered, what is it in, trying to think of other languages, that it has a negative connotation because the left side, it is, what is it? Because you can deceive people, because people used to shake hands with their right hand. You would shake hands with your right hand, because that was an indication that you were not pulling a weapon. But a left-handed person could shake hands with their right hand and draw their sword with the left. So you can't really trust them so much. So that's me. So the left is the side, it's the not good side. So what's the menorah, our Hanukkah menorah is doing on the left side? It's like you should have, like, well, design-wise, it's better. You got your mezuzah here, the menorah there. It's like a nice thing. It frames the doorways, like, not really. So yes, but it is more about signifying that the mezuzah of the holiness is on the right, but the Hanukkah menorah is like, we're looking for Aesop. We're looking for people who have gone on the left side, and I mean left politically. I mean, like, they've gone kind of off the deep end, and we're looking for them. So we're looking for them on that side. And also the tradition is that the Hanukkah is lit low down. It's put on a low table that is below 10 tefachim, which is a tefach is like a man's hand's breadth. So it's supposed to be lit from at 10. It says the Shekhinah, the divine presence, doesn't go below 10. So it says the divine presence goes to 10 and no further. And the menorah picks up the slack of like what's down at the bottom, like the dreck. It says the menorah is to find the dreck and polish it up. It's like the show that I watched. It's like, what's it called? Where they go to flea market flip or flea market swap, whatever. And they find the stuff that like looks like so pathetic, and they turn it into something and sell it like for hundreds of dollars. It's like, it looks to me like garbage. It's like, but in the garbage there's treasures there, and we know it. So it's one thing if you don't know it, but think about what people will do a dumpster dive. If you lost your diamond ring in a dumpster, you'd be willing to go in and go get it, even if you got kind of schmutzy along the way. It's like, you say, oh, there's so much garbage, I'll just let it go. It's like, no, it's precious. So this is our precious search and rescue effort for people who have lost their way. And those people who've lost their way include ourselves. So we don't say like, oh, I'm great and everybody else has a problem. It's like, I've lost my way also. It says the Jewish people, we've lost our way. We grow up in a Christian world. We are in a secular world. We are influenced by that. Remember, I think we talked about maybe last week. It's like, if you're having a bar mitzvah party and your theme is tennis and you have tennis shoes on the table, I'm not saying that's evil, but I'm saying you kind of missed the whole point. You missed the point. Like, that's how you celebrate your bar mitzvah? Is with tennis shoes? Like, that's American. You're not going to find that in any Parsha that I've ever heard. So again, it's not evil, it's just misplaced. So we're looking for like the lost parts of ourselves and the lost parts of our people and the lost parts of humanity, which is why the Hanukkah menorah is also lit. It has to be lit when it's night, but it has to be lit at a time when people are on the street, because the goal isn't for a private little event. It's meant to illuminate the street and to provide a beacon, just like a lighthouse provides light for ships that are lost at sea. And that's what we're trying to do. Gazing at the lights of the menorah, gazing at the lights is considered to bring wisdom and clarity, because all of us have a lot of sorting out to do of what's in our life, what needs to be taken out of our life. And again, we're not talking about things that are evil. We're talking about things that are misplaced or true misappropriation. It's like, that doesn't really belong in your life as a Jewish person, or not to be used in that way. So Hanukkah is about that clarity, and we're specifically looking to reunite Aesop with Jacob. We're looking to link the month of Kislev with the month of Tevet. We're looking to put those twins back in the sack together. They came into the world together. They are buried somewhat together. And the greatness that is in Aesop we need it in order to perfect the world. It doesn't help us we don't want Aesop to disappear. We need Aesop to be fully present and engaged and all of the strengths that he has. And God willing, we'll do that. And, we see little snippets of light when this happens, but that's what we're looking for overall. So God willing, as we launch this month, so we already have the good, I won't say the good omen. We already have the good omen that on the 27th of Cheshvan, we're celebrating and commemorating the land being dried, and Noah can go out and we can start over again. We can start over again. So no matter what's happened, you should never say, ugh, it's too late, I'm too old, I'm too far gone, too much water under the bridge. Any of those things, not true. So it says that the end of Cheshvan kicks this off, and Rosh Chodesh Kislev inaugurates this month of not just being optimistic, but this search and rescue for ourselves in other people. And I think it's fascinating that so many people celebrate Hanukkah. Again, they even distort Hanukkah. People who have a Hanukkah bush, or they have somehow managed to turn their Hanukkah thing into red and green and combine it with Christmas. Very misguided, very misguided. What can I say? There's even cards out there that are Merry Hanukkah or something, like people are trying to combine. It's like, that's not the combination. So you're looking for something, but you're looking in the wrong place. So hopefully our light of Hanukkah and our light of the month of Kislev will illuminate ourselves, illuminate our eyes, the eyes of our fellow Jewish people, illuminate humanity into how to best bring together the forces of Aesop and the forces of Jacob, which are meant to bring total perfection to the world. They're twins. There's not one that a twin can't do without their other part. They've done studies as a result of horrible things where twins were separated at birth. There was a period of time where they did that as an experiment, which is just so horrific to think about. Actually, there was a set of triplets that they separated at birth to see what would happen. How people played God and thought that they would play with human life. And each of them always felt that there was something missing. And, one ended up actually killing himself after they were reunited because they couldn't even deal with the whole thing. But a twin always wants its other half. And so we cannot, it's like a short-term thing that Jacob wears Esau's clothes. But in the end, Esau needs to wear Esau's clothes and come into the tent. Hopefully our Hanukkah will illuminate all of us, ourselves, pieces of Esau that are lost, and bring them back, bring clarity to ourselves, the Jewish people, all of humanity. And Hanukkah is the beginning of the light of Mashiach. And God willing, we will see that redemption and we will see that illumination. And that aha moment will be for everyone, the entire world. So have a wonderful Shabbos. Enjoy the launch of Kislev tonight as we start this wonderful, amazing month and start feeling Hanukkah coming to the fore for us. Anybody have any other questions at all? Okay, ladies, have a wonderful Shabbos. It's great to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ellyn.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.